listen to this amazing story that we have to tell you. 4 sisters at a Baghdad mission braved that massive U.S. bombing campaign to protect 22 orphans, many with physical and mental disabilities. NBC's Jim Bruton is there with the 1st Battalion, 4th Marines. And Jim, tell us what you found.
Hi, Natalie. That's right. An amazing story of courage and faith. The Missionaries of Charity have a mission right here in Baghdad. It was opened in 1991 personally by Mother Teresa. But what makes the story so amazing is that when Baghdad was in total mayhem, when local government officials begged them to leave for their safety, the nuns refused to leave, saying, "Where would the children go?" So the 1st Battalion, 4th Marines and I paid a visit to them today to find out how they were doing. Here's the story.
We're here at an orphanage, and we've got children with various types of medical conditions. Some of them have appear to be have some mental disorders, while others seem to have some physical impairment too as well. But right now I'm just trying to get to know them, let them feel comfortable with me, that I'm here to help them first get acquainted with them so that they're not scared of me, and then that way I can bring in the rest of my crew to come meet them.
Well, our main purpose today was to see what we really could do for the sisters. We were able to bring in some food through humanitarian daily rations. These are like our meals ready to eat, our MREs in the field. They have a total package of nutrients, and we showed them to the sisters. They said these were perfect for the children's diet, and they immediately started preparing the food for them to eat right there. In addition, we also brought in our Navy corpsmen who are assigned to our Marine Division. They brought their medical supplies and their medical expertise, such as you saw with Joe Gallardo right there. So we were able to provide some medical assistance and some dietary assistance to the children at the mission. In addition, we were able to set up a satellite telephone and allow the Mother Superior there, Sister Dancy, to call to the Mother Superior in the Chicago area just to get word out that they were okay. No one had heard anything about them from the time that Baghdad started to fall. So it was of great relief to the other sisters in that order around the world to finally hear how they were doing. And now, as a follow-up, the Marines are looking to go to the UN headquarters here to find some lights, perhaps a generator to establish in the mission to make their lives a little bit easier. And as you can see, the nuns were perhaps a little camera shy, but they are not short in courage or spirit. And that's about all we can say. It was just a wonderful day and a great visit.
And it certainly looks, Jim, like the kids are doing well and seem to be in good condition and seem to be very happy there. Were they at all scared during the bombing campaign?
They were a little frightened. They just didn't know what was going on. They were very uncertain, but the love and the care of the sisters kept them calm. And it's amazing. Like you say, Natalie, the children are very happy given their condition. There was one little infant there who was born with no arms and no legs who came to them. There were a variety of mental handicaps and physically challenged children as well, but each one really wanted our attention. And I think there was hardly a dry eye in the place when we left.
Oh, I can only imagine just seeing their little faces. It breaks your heart. And Jim, tell us more about the area where that monastery is. We know it's in Baghdad, but was there general damage in the area?
Surprisingly not. This mission was pretty near the central part of Baghdad where the Al Rashid Hotel is and where the Palestine Hotel is. Both of these hotels are where a lot of journalists have positioned themselves to transmit out live feeds and archived reports. And that part of Baghdad itself didn't seem to be too hard hit. And I think that's another credit to our U.S. military's ability to strategically target only those sites that were important to our arrival in Baghdad.
Jim, I just want to ask you a quick question. Is that gunfire also behind you that we're hearing?
Yes, it is. Last night we were under imminent danger of an attack. Luckily it didn't come. Tonight may be another story, but The sound of gunfire in the background is very frequent, and what's interesting is it's not so much our Marines or our military in general that's involved as it is essentially local turf wars. A lot of people fled, they have come back, they find out things are a little different now, and so I think the dust is settling in a strange way, but they're sorting themselves out, and hopefully the sound of gunfire will decrease over the ensuing night.
Absolutely, and you do be careful. Jim Bruton with that amazing story about that monastery there. Thank you so much, and those kids, just break your heart to see them. U.S. Marines are now pulling out of the capital, giving control to the U.S. Army as the mission now moves from fighting to keeping the peace and also to building a stable government. And NBC's Jim Bruton is with the 1st Regiment, 4th Marines of the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force in Baghdad with the story.
The U.S. Army has arrived in Baghdad to begin its phase-in operation. As the soldiers arrived and settled into their new home, I asked the commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Joel Armstrong, what he hoped to accomplish during his stay.
Our role right now is to finish up combat operations in Iraq, to help this government here transition to a stable and peaceful government.
Lieutenant Colonel Armstrong feels that while people are basically happy now, he's not sure they will remain so unless basic services are established soon. Interestingly, when I asked the Marines about their sense of purpose and their sense of mission here, their answers were more reflective. Here's what their commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel John Mayer, had to say.
The mission for the Marines has always been a combat mission. It's to trial by fire, to go out to locate, close with, and destroy the enemy. And that's what Marines do. That's what we do best, and we've done a great job of it 3 weeks coming. Now that we're at Baghdad and pretty much the major combat operations are over, we're transitioning. This is a transition period. The U.S. Army's come in and take our spot, and we'll reposition to the south to do the civil military affairs to help this country, this great country, rebuild itself.
I'd like to emphasize that the Marines are leaving Baghdad only. They are not departing Iraq. They are removing to the south to maintain peace through continued military presence, to continue to provide humanitarian aid, and to assist the Army in its phase-in operations as needed. Jim Bruton, MSNBC, Baghdad.
Is home to one of the most important cities of the ancient world, Babylon. Its location marked by ruins just east of the Euphrates River and south of Baghdad. And NBC's Jim Bruton was one of the first journalists to make it into the ancient region since the end of the war. And he files this report.
Today, a small group from the 1st Battalion, 4th Marines came with me to the ruins of Babylon. It was amazing to walk within the reconstruction of the city and Nebuchadnezzar's palace, and it made me vividly imagine what it was like to live back during that time.
I'm Lieutenant Commander Tom Weber, U.S. Navy, here in Iraq after the war and the freedom of the people of Iraq. We're at the ruins of Babylon right now, looking at some of the digs and seeing what they have uncovered for over 2,600 years ago, back when Nebuchadnezzar reigned and was king of this empire. And it's a beautiful place. I'm glad we got the opportunity to see it. And right now you just see some of the earth that's been unearthed to show some of the ancient ruins.
The Babylonians were incredibly advanced for their day, designing rain gutters into their streets and using the wheel. As I walked through the Ishtar Gate and down the procession way, I could see carved images of ancient gods all around me. We know what we do about ancient Babylonians because they wrote on clay using wedge-shaped letters called cuneiform. Their daily lives are also reflected in this fragment of a smoking pipe and this pottery shard. But what foundation was required for the rise of such a great civilization?
Hammurabi's Code came out not exactly the same time as the Old Testament Code of Ethics for the Jewish people, but it's quite similar. And it's amazing that all the people at that time had similar ethics, but the Jewish group went along with what Moses wrote down, and the people of this area tried to live according to Hammurabi's Code.
There has been a lot of press lately about the looting of local sites and museums around Iraq, and I can tell you that Babylon has suffered as well. But one of the directives of the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force has been to stop such looting, and to that end it's established its headquarters very nearby. Over the next few days, the MEF will be meeting with the locally elected mayor and city officials to discuss this and other issues. The goal, how to maintain stability while Iraq transitions forward into its future. Jim Bruton, MSNBC, Babylon.
Now to Babylon, to the rich but not so famous home of Saddam Hussein. Seeing how Saddam lived is perhaps one of the most intriguing discoveries behind who this man is or was. NBC cameraman Jim Bruton is with the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force at Saddam's palace in Babylon and gives us this inside look.
We've all heard about the palaces of Saddam Hussein, and we've seen some photos and video of the outside. But like everyone else, we've been curious, what are they like on the inside? Today, the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force took us on a tour of the palace next to the ruins of Babylon. Here's what we saw.
I'm Lieutenant Colonel Rick Long with the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force. We're here in one of Saddam Hussein's many palaces. Now it is billeting quarters for our enlisted Marines. The palace is absolutely amazing. It is gigantic, and I've been told that it's one of his smaller palaces. It's just absolutely amazing the way this guy lived while other Iraqis were starving. We found the palace. It pretty much was totally looted. There wasn't even a sink, a toilet bowl. A lot of the wooden and marble fixtures were stolen. So it's been pretty much destroyed. I don't think there's a window left. But one day, hopefully, it can be restored for the Iraqi people.
I also asked the Lieutenant Colonel if the Marines shouldered any responsibility for the recent sacking of museums in Babylon.
Well, you know, I wish we could be at all places at all times to do the right thing, and then the world would be a lot better place. Unfortunately, we can't be everywhere at the same time. At the time a lot of the looting was taking place, you have to remember, we were still in firefights. We were on the attack toward Tikrit. We were in firefights in Baghdad, so, you know, as much as you want to be everywhere at once, you just can't.
Whatever was lost to war, Iraq has been given back its future. Saddam's palaces will now belong to the Iraqis. Whether they choose to plunder them further or refurbish them for a new, more civil role is still open to question. The only certainty is one of change and the hope for a bright and shared future for the people of Iraq. Jim Bruton, MSNBC, Babylon.
Gotta love that picture of the guy doing push-ups in Saddam's palace on the floor there.
Our next guest was one of the many brave journalists embedded with U.S. forces during the war to liberate Iraq. Producer Jim Bruton traveled with the 1st Battalion, 4th Marines, among other missions. He visited the ancient city of Babylon and was one of the first journalists to see those ruins. He joins us now in the studio. Jim, thanks for joining us and welcome back. Glad to see you're safe and sound.
Thank you, Lester. It's great to be here.
I wonder what your thoughts were watching Jim's piece there about that crucial battle for Baghdad. What are your recollections of when you and the Marines entered Baghdad?
When we got to Baghdad, we actually were part of the amphibious crossing into Baghdad with the armored personnel carriers. And once we crossed into what was basically a sewage dump, we stayed there overnight and then moved a little closer into the center of town over the next several days. We were very aware that we were targets, that they knew where we were, but we didn't know necessarily where enemy fire was going to come from. We did lose a few people in those first few days. We brought our tanks in. They fortified our position so that we could edge closer in to the center of the city. So it was, I totally understood how close some of the decisive moments were in the beginning stages of that final push for Baghdad.
With that final push, did things start moving even quicker than anyone could have imagined in terms of how fast things were getting in there?
They absolutely did. As you may remember, within a week of March 21st, we were already within 50 miles of Baghdad, and we pretty much needed to hold position there to let our logistics catch up with us so that when we made that final push, it would be without a hitch, and that's exactly how it was carried off.
Let's talk about some of the moments you shared with us after arriving in Baghdad. There were some nuns that had sort of lost contact. You kind of became a conduit to check on them. Tell me about that story.
That's right. The Missionaries of Charity, the same order as Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa opened a mission in Baghdad in 1991, and when we went there to check on them, because there had been no word to the outside world on their status. Were they okay? Were they alive? Had they abandoned their mission? So we went in and found 3 nuns from India, 1 from Bangladesh. They had in their care 22 children, all with severe physical and mental handicaps. One infant, for instance, was born without any arms and legs, but just as happy as could be. You could tell there was a lot of love in this mission. Everything was very clean, though very basic. The nuns, for taking care of 22 children with special needs, did not look haggard at the end of the day. So we went to check on them and see what we could do for them. And in the end, we were able to take them some fire extinguishers, some bolts of cloth, some needed basic supplies.
And they got to get word out that they were okay as well.
Absolutely. We set up the satellite phone, and courtesy of NBC and MSNBC, they got the word out.
You saw a lot of horrible things as well along the way there, and I know you up close saw some of these mass graves that we've heard about. Tell us about it.
That was right as I was starting to remove back to Kuwait and to come home. There were reports of some mass graves in the area, so we went out one afternoon and I found a pile of bones with 1 skull. Went back the next morning, now there are 50 piles of bones with 50 skulls. And what was surprising to me were the locals that were out there really wanted us to come in with our cameras. Rather than saying, please stay away while we find our loved ones and we grieve, they wanted the world to hear the story. They wanted President Bush to see the story. They wanted the world to understand how important it was for the coalition forces to go in there and free them from the tyranny of Saddam.
We also mentioned the introduction. You were one of the first to be able to visit post-war Babylon.
That's right.
And I know there's a strange contrast there. You've got these ruins as well as Saddam Hussein, one of the many palaces.
Exactly. It was great. I'm an archaeology buff, so to be able to go into the ruins of Babylon, which are more the reconstruction of Nebuchadnezzar's palace than anything, was a real treat. These are ruins we read about, we hear about in the Old Testament, but we never get to see. The ruins were pretty much shut down in 1985 while Saddam Hussein built this palace right next door. And it was interesting to actually contrast a visit to both places.
Right. Well, Jim Bruton, good to have you here again. We're glad you're back safe. Terrific job over there.
Thank you, Lester. Thank you.
Coming up, remembering those who risked their lives for their country and celebrating America's bravest and the families who